So what happens when a murder investigation, one that seems pretty straightforward at first, leads a detective to the absolute darkest corners of the internet, and he comes face to face with something that isn't even human? Today we're diving into a first-person account from a police detective that starts with 3 bodies and ends with a question that honestly will make you rethink everything you think you know about the web.
Okay, so picture this. The town of Frensburg. For 5 straight years, it had been quiet, like not a single murder. And then, that piece doesn't just end, it gets completely obliterated. In the span of just 1 week, 3 bodies turn up. Each murder is more brutal than the last, and this small town is suddenly terrified. The local police, they're grappling with a complete nightmare. You have to understand, for the detective leading this case, this wasn't just another stack of paperwork. It was personal. He describes these 3 case files on his desk like they were alive, just staring back at him, almost begging him for justice. The pressure was already massive, and believe me, he had no idea where this was all headed. Now, these weren't just murders. They were rituals. Each victim had their throat cut and their body was hung upside down until it was completely drained of blood. And the killer? A total ghost. There was no forced entry, not a single witness, not one piece of forensic evidence left behind. It was perfect. Too perfect. With absolutely nothing to go on, the case stalled out. It went cold. The detective, he just hits a brick wall, and that's when the self-doubt starts to creep in. He's asking himself, what am I missing here? Am I just not good enough for this? This perfect crime wasn't just baffling him. It was starting to break him down. So what do? He decides to start from scratch. Total reset. He goes back to the victims themselves, digging into their personal lives, talking to family, friends, anyone, just searching for any tiny little thread that might connect them. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to pull on the one thread that would unravel the entire thing. And that's when he finds it. The big breakthrough. These victims, they weren't strangers at all. See, in the real world, they were pretty isolated. But online, they were a unit. All 3 were professional gamers, they were all obsessed with the game League of Legends, and this is the kicker, they were all members of the exact same gaming team or clan. This changed everything. I mean, think about it. The clan had 5 members. 3 of them are now dead. That leaves 2 people. 2! So were they the next victims? Or were they the killers? All of a sudden, the investigation went from chasing a faceless ghost to focusing on 2 very specific people. So, with 2 names in hand, the investigation finally has a real direction. The detective tracks down the last 2 members of the clan, a young woman named Sarah Green and a guy named Terry Wentworth. He had a feeling, a strong one, that one of them held the key to this whole mess. In the interviews, wow, they could not have been more different. Sarah, she seemed totally normal. She offered the detective coffee, she cried when she talked about her friends, she just seemed genuinely heartbroken. Terry, on the other hand, was a complete wreck. He was defensive, hostile, sweating so much was soaking through his pants, and weirder still, he had this kind of smug attitude about the whole thing. All the suspicions started piling up on him, and fast. So naturally, the detective brings Terry in for a chat at the station. And under those harsh interrogation room lights, away from his comfort zone, the pressure just builds and builds. The detective's best skill was reading liars, and after a full day of questioning, Terry's whole defensive act just started to fall apart. And then Terry confesses. But it's not what the detective was expecting at all. He points the finger right at Sarah. He says it was all her idea. Apparently their teammates, the victims, were holding them back, costing them tournament after tournament. For Sarah and Terry, this wasn't just a game. It was their livelihood, and the others were a problem that needed to be solved. So, according to Terry, since the others wouldn't just quit the clan, Sarah came up with this final, absolutely horrific solution. She went onto the dark web and hired a quote-unquote hitman to make them disappear. For good. Just like that, the case seemed solved. A cold, twisted, but very human plot over a video game. So the detective, thinking he's just tying up the last loose end, goes with Terry to Sarah's house to arrest her. He's preparing to close the books on this bizarre case. He has absolutely no idea that he's about to walk into a waking nightmare that will defy every single law of nature he knows. So they get there, and when she's cornered, Sarah confesses. But she insists the detective has no idea what he's really dealing with. She sits down at her computer, opens up the Tor browser, and pulls up this strange chat room. She tells him she's going to show him the hitman she hired.
The moment that chat window appears, the entire room changes. The computer screen goes black, and even though it's a hot summer day outside, the room becomes frigid. I mean, an unnatural, bone-chilling cold fills the air, so intense the detective could actually see his own breath. Something was very, very wrong.
And then came the voice. It wasn't human. It was this deafening, thundering roar that just blasted from the computer speakers, shaking the entire room. It screamed, "Who is he?" And in that split second, the detective understood Sarah's fear. This was no ordinary assassin. What happened next is just pure terror. The detective feels his own hand, totally against his will, draw his service weapon. His arm moves completely on its own, raising the gun and pressing the cold steel of the barrel right to his own temple. He's screaming inside his own head, but his body wasn't his anymore. The whole room just explodes into absolute chaos. Sarah, her eyes completely blank, starts smashing her own face into her steel desk again and again. A second officer just glances at the black screen and without a single word draws his weapon and shoots himself in the head. And just as the detective's own finger is tightening on the trigger, a third officer has the presence of mind to lunge forward and smash the laptop into a million pieces. The instant that screen shattered, it was over. The presence, the cold, it all vanished. But the room was a war zone. One officer dead, a witness, Sarah, battered beyond recognition, and the lead detective saved from his own hand at the very last second. He was alive, but any hope of a logical explanation was gone forever.
And in that moment, the detective had his final, chilling realization. He had gone to that house to arrest a person, but the hitman that Sarah had contacted on the dark web, the thing she paid to eliminate her teammates, it was not a person. It was not human.
In his own words, the detective believes what they encountered was an entity from another world, something ancient, something malevolent, something our language doesn't even have a name for. It wasn't a killer for hire. It was a force that feeds on death, and Sarah had just held the door open for it.
The detective's account really is a warning. We all assume the dark web is just a place for the worst parts of humanity. But his story, it suggests it might be a gateway for something else entirely. And it leaves us with this really haunting question. If we aren't the only ones lurking in the darkest corners of the internet, what else is down there, listening?